Welcome to the Imperial Truth. I'm your host, Eric, and today I am ranking the Legiones Astartes cultures in a tier list because that's going to be fun. So, a few just caveats before we get started. This is not talking about characters. We can do a video about characters. In fact, I probably will do a one about characters at some point. But just be aware that this is not a reflection of the specific characters that are in any one legion. It is also not the special units. So we are not focusing on the military units that exist in any specific Legiones Astartes group. That's not what we're talking about. And we're also not talking about flavor. We're not talking about the wartime sort of a flavorfulness of a legion. We can have those videos. We can have those conversations if you want. Let me know in the comments. But for this video, that's not what we're focusing on. This video is exclusively focusing on what are the legionaries doing when they're not fighting, when they're not training to fight, when they're not preparing their war gear to fight. What are they doing on their downtime? What are they doing with their recreational time? How are they engaging with each other socially? And this is going to be based exclusively on the novels, specifically because I don't have what's the word? I don't have sort of an encyclopedic knowledge of all of the black books and everything that's out there, right? So I'm basing it on what I know. If I miss something, if there's some black book or other alternative source somewhere that gives a lot of information, let me know. Yeah. And I'm going to point out that the bottom seven aren't on this list at all. And the reason for that is twofold. Number one, there just isn't a lot to say about the ones that are not on this list. And number two, by leaving the bottom seven off, you don't know who the number one is going to be unless you scroll forward in the video and check. So that gives you a little bit of incentive to watch and see what we end up with. So before we start, think about who you think, which legion has the best culture, the best picture of what they're doing in their downtime. What are they doing with their free time? So let's go ahead and get started. Number 11. Number 11 is the Dark Angels. The Dark Angels are one of those legions that I am really disappointed with in the Horus Heresy, not because they're bad. I think they have a lot of cool things going on, but because as a, the authors made the decision that we're going to keep them so secret that their lore is either doesn't make sense with itself, like it doesn't there's some contextual issues there, or we don't get a good picture of it. So we know that when the Dark Angels are not fighting or preparing to fight, they are standing around in circles and keeping secrets, and they're keeping secrets about the circles, and sometimes there are circle secrets, and that's about all we know. We know that there are circles. We know that there are secrets. We know that there are different groups that stand in different regions in the circles. And there are more inner circles and more outer circles. And there are bigger secrets and there are smaller secrets. But we never really get a good view of like, what do those rituals look like? What do these initiation rites look like? We do get those in other context. So we see it in sort of War of Secrets, which is a 40K novel. We get to see a little bit of that there. But we generally don't get to see these in the Horus Heresy, not in any real clarity. And we don't get to see anything else that they do other than standing in circles and keeping secrets in any of the books. I mean, I guess we get a little bit of view of what they're doing on Caliban, but a lot of that is subterfuge, and again kind of revolving around secrets and creating secret police and killing loyalists and things like that. It's just not a lot, and it would be really cool to get a view of what they do, because they're supposed to be sort of the best of the best. They're the first. They do everything that everybody else does, and it would be really cool to see that. Like how do you get initiated into something like the is it the Raven Guard, or no, Raven Wing, as opposed to whatever the wing is that keeps the secrets and does like the spy work, right? Like they have these different wings, they have these different groups that are pretty cool, that are military formations. But like, what are you doing outside of that to engage with those? It would be really cool to see. And they before you come at me in the comments and they're like, you hate Dark Angels. I don't. They're specifically 11th on this list when tier lists are normally top 10 because I wanted to talk about them and talk about sort of like the fact that I would like to see a lot more of them. It would be really cool to have some videos about it. Like we have the Cypher character and we just don't get to see, we get to know sort of like the background of where Cypher comes from. But like, do they have other people like that that are like ritual and members and things like that? Like it would be really cool to see all of that. Number 10 are the Night Lords. So we do get to see a lot of what the Night Lords do. It's not good stuff, but they do have recreation. Like they do have entertainment. We know that they really like to torture people, and that they often are preying on the crew. So we get some views of I'm thinking about like the in the Unremembered Empire series. I think it's the Unremembered Empire book. But we get to see some of the characters, and they refer to them as collecting thralls from below ship and going down and torturing them and doing all sorts of things. We get a lot more of this in the 40k books, but as far as the Horus Heresy novels are, that's about as far as it goes. We know that they like to torture people. We know that they like to skin people. We know that they like to do really horrible things to humans in their free time. But we don't get a lot beyond that. We don't get any views of that. We get to see, I think we get to see Conrad Kurz and his little like floor of people that are like sewed together. So we get to see pictures of what he's doing, but we don't get to see as much from the legionaries' perspective in terms of what they're doing with their free time. But we do know what they're doing. It is more information than we get them standing in circles and keeping secrets. They are definitely doing horrible things. Yeah, and so we get to see them in some contexts. I would like to see more. I think the Night Lords are a pretty interesting legion, and have a lot of things that we could talk about. I will also note that there is a lot of like jostling for position. I wouldn't say that that's recreation, although maybe in the Night Lords specifically, jockeying for position and backstabbing each other and stuff is actually entertainment. So that is a possibility. Number 9, the White Scars. I wish the White Scars were higher on this list. We do get to see a bit of their culture, though. They do have a pretty fleshed out culture. We know that they write poetry and they make art, which is going to be a theme for the next couple of our options. Yeah, and that's pretty cool. We understand that the Jagatai Khan thinks that in order to be a good warrior, you have to be a good poet. Which is kind of a cool idea. And so we get to see them. We are aware that they do these things. We don't actually get to see them writing poetry, to my knowledge. I can't think of any situation where they're like sitting down with like a maybe like a quill and like doing calligraphy and writing some long poem. We don't get to see things like that, but we do know that they do it and they engage with it, and that it is part of their culture, which is nice to know. It is nice to know that they, when they're not fighting and they're not preparing to fight and they're not taking care of their war gear, that they are sitting down and writing about their experiences probably and their perspectives in the world. And we even get some references to texts that other White Scars have written. So we get to know some text names, but we don't necessarily get to see what's in those texts or get to see anybody doing those things. But still, it's not nothing, and that's good because the bottom 7 on the list are largely we don't get to see any of what they're doing in their downtime. Number 8 are the Iron Hands. So the Iron Hands are one of those legions that we don't get to see a lot of them pre-heresy, and post-heresy they are largely broken apart. We do know that the different sort of chapters that exist within the legion are families, and that they are grouped by families largely. So we get to see things like that. I'm thinking about like the Averni, and being the first company, I think, is what they are. Although you can correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. But what I'm really focusing on is Iron Hands are craftsmen and they make things. And so we get to see like Freighter Thematica doing experiments on the Sisyphean. Is that the ship name? But we get to see them doing experiments and building things and creating things and talking about doing experiments and interacting with each other as they're doing experiments, which is pretty cool. It's more. This is higher on the list than the other ones because we actually get to see the characters do it. We get to see them have conversations while they're doing it. We get to see them sort of postulating. We know that there is a little bit of strain or like conflict around specifically Freighter Thematica and the fact that he's not very careful about things. But we do then know from that these guys are engaging in creations and they're making things and they're innovating and they're building technologies and they're repairing armor and things like that. So we get to see those, not repairing armor, but like creating new gadgets. So we get to see those things in the Legion, which is nice, even though it's sort of after the Legion has broken apart. We also get to see a little bit of the interfamily fights and the conflicts and things like that. I'm thinking about the plot line where some of the Iron Warriors have basically made a fake Ferrus Manus and are serving it. And so there's some conversations around different families and sort of again a little bit of that like jockeying for position and trying to assert their familial bonds and political gains and stuff within the Legion. So we get to see that with Iron Hands again, building on this idea. We know that the White Scars write poetry, but we get to see the Iron Hands do their things and engage in them. Number 7 are the or the not the blood angels, the word bearers. So the word bearers are number 7 because again, we get to see them do things. We see them writing, we see them copying texts, we see them sometimes writing treaties on things that Lorgar has said in the Horus Heresy. Again, after the Horus Heresy, in the 40K books, we get some much better pictures of this stuff. But in the Horus Heresy, that's about where it stops. So again, a little bit like our Iron Warriors, we get to see them do some things. We get to see them actually writing and copying texts, and engaging in worship, which is another thing we get to see. They're visiting at least with Argotol's story, they're visiting Cyrene Valantis, and they are confessing to her. They're engaging in quasi religious interactions and rituals. We know that um, their chaplains were a little bit more active than pretty much any other chaplaincy that we know of in the Horus Heresy. And so there's a lot of sort of guidance and things like that. So when they're not fighting, they're studying the texts of Lorgar, they're writing about the texts of Lorgar, they are engaging in sort of at first emperor worship and later chaos worship. And so we get to see a bit more of their sort of downtime activities than we do in any of the groups that we've talked about so far. Number 6 are the Blood Angels. I apologize. So the Blood Angels are here largely, in a large part, because of 2 characters that we get to see. One is Dominion Zephon, who we get to see, and we'll come back to him in a minute. And then the other is, I'm so sorry, the Flesh Terror, whose name will come to me in a minute, but all I can think about right now is Argotol, and that is not the right name of the Flesh Terror. So Amen. Amen and Zephon are the 2 sort of guys that we get to see the most of this with. So we get to see the Blood Angels creating things. So we get to see Ammon. Ammon? That doesn't seem right. Anyway, so we get to see the Flesh Terror. Well, I'll use his other name until it pops in my head. Somebody's screaming at their keyboard right now. I apologize. My brain blanks sometimes. Anyway, we get to see him making things, and we get to see him creating things, and we actually get to see him having some, expressing his creativity. And then for Dominion Zephon, we get to see him playing a musical instrument. So we realize that he is a musician. So a little bit like we're building on all of these things. We know that the Blood Angels are engaging in art. It's referenced over and over and over again in the lore. We get to talk about the Flesh Terror making his art, and then we also get to see Dominion Zephon making music and talking about and the loss of his ability to play an instrument and make music. And so in that way, we get to see a lot more of any of the culture of the Blood Angels than we did anybody up to this point, which is nice. It's good to see. This gets fleshed out a lot more in I think Dante is the book that I'm thinking about. And if it sounds like I'm moving away, I'm grabbing my phone so I can look up the Flesh Terror's name. Um, but yeah, we get to see in the book Dante a lot more of what the Blood Angels are doing and why they are doing it in order to sort of preserve their sanity. Number 5 is the Emperor's Children. So the Emperor's Children, we get to see quite a bit, specifically in the books Fulgrim and Angel Exterminatus are the two big books that we get to see them. And we get to see them making art. We get to see them enjoying art and engaging in sort of critiquing art and talking about it, but they're making it, they're posing for art. They are doing a lot of sort of things around art, but we also get to see them feasting. They have a tradition where they feast before a battle happens. And so we get to see them engaging in that, which is technically recreation. And yeah, so we get to see them doing a lot of different things with each other and engaging in it and see the camaraderie around it. So again, just kind of like adding to this the different things that are present. They are, in addition to, the Blood Angels making music and stuff, we get to see the Emperor's Children listening to music and making music and engaging in the art and engaging with artists to make art, and all sorts of things. So they have a very, unfortunately, a very corrupted later, but a pretty distinct culture with that. In addition to that art, in the Angel Exterminatus book, we get to see them furthermore engaging in like revelry and drunken behavior and using drugs and all sorts of stuff. Yeah, so we get to see a lot more than just the art side of it. It is, some of it gets pretty dark, a little bit like we had in our uh with our Night Lords, but it is nevertheless, we get to see a pretty good picture of them from all of that stuff. Oh, I'm so sorry. Spoilers. Number 4, appropriately, we have the Iron Warriors. So the Iron Warriors are actually the real reason why the Dark Angels are on this list. Because I made this list and I put everything together, and then I realized after the fact that I had forgotten the Iron Warriors, and they really definitely deserve to be on this list. So again, a lot of what we get to see from them is from Angel Exterminatus, but we do get to see a bit of it. So the Iron Warriors, aside from preparing for a battle and doing their thing, they engage in essentially wargaming. They have a club, a portion of the ship where they meet and they get together and they play war games with each other, and that is their downtime activity. You might argue that that's technically preparing, like preparing for war and stuff, but they're doing it for entertainment and to compete with each other and whatnot. And I am so sorry. I finally found it. It's Nasser Amit for the Flesh Terror. So you can stop screaming at me. Yeah, I apologize for messing that up. Sometimes names just don't stick. So the we get to see the Iron Warriors doing this wargaming, but we also know that they engage in science and creation. We get to see more from the perspective of Perturabo, but we do know that the Iron Warriors themselves are making things and inventing things, and even engage in studying the sciences. So there is an Iron Warrior, for example, who studies Volbron, I think his name is, the stone rot, and he studies geology and bases his siege tactics on the geology of an area. And so they're pretty well rounded in terms of how they approach their downtime and what they do when they're not fighting in war. Our number three culture of our Legiones Astartes are the Space Wolves. um, for those of you who follow the channel, I don't like the Space Wolves. I think that they are a pretty poorly written legion. I think that they could have been done a lot better. However, we do get to see a lot of what they do. We do get to see a lot of it. There's a lot of feasting, a lot of wrestling and fighting. There's a lot of ritual and storytelling and weird reading and casting of runes. They are very Viking-esque culture, and we get to see a lot of that in the books. So even if I feel like it's not well written, or it could have been done a lot better, we do get to see a lot of it, and we get to see them pretty often throughout the series. There's entire books that are basically just, we get like day-to-day activity of the Space Wolves. Even in Unremembered Empire, we get to see them lounging around Gilliman's fire a little bit, his fireplace, a little bit like dogs, and just kind of chilling, just hanging out there in case they're needed, which is still downtime activity. So we still get to see them doing those things. If you wanted to write, I guess one way to approach all of what I'm talking about here is, if you wanted to write a story about what the Space Marines are doing when they're not fighting or preparing to fight or training in a practice cage, what are they doing? Which ones would you have the best sort of basis for that story? Space Wolves are pretty high on this list, right? There's a lot that they could be doing, and you can kind of imagine them doing these things just on their downtime. Our number two legion for our culture and what we think they're doing in their downtime are the Thousand Sons. And the Thousand Sons are sort of weird because their psychic studies basically bleed into everything else that they do. However, we do get this really well developed hierarchy of the Thousand Sons. We know that they're studying. We know that they're reading books. We know that they're doing research. We know that they're studying the Psychana. We know that some of them have like little pet projects that they're working on in terms of their research. We get a very good feel for what they're doing and the different organizations that exist within the chapter that are quasi military, but are also sort of social hierarchy, right? Like if you are a member of the Corvidae, you are in your downtime, you are practicing rune casting and practicing reading the futures and practicing picking the skeins of fate, right? The I'm trying to remember that the biomancer are the Pavoni, are they the biomancers? But they're basically, there's the biomancer group, and basically they're like surgeons. They do surgery, they heal people, right? So we get to see what they're doing outside of combat, and we get a very good view of it. Thing like I said, in the Thousand Sons, it's actually kind of weird because I think that we get to see the best picture of the Space Wolves and the Thousand Sons in a lot of books, because there are like four, maybe five books that are very centered around the conflict on Prospero. And so we just get to see a lot of these two legions in particular in sort of juxtaposition with each other. So let's go to our number one. Who do you think the number one legion is going to be? Probably not who you think. The number one legion, in my point of view, are the World Eaters. The World Eaters have these of pit fights that they basically put on. Pit fights are an essential part of the World Eater Legion and what they do. The whole gladiatorial thing, it is entertainment, it is letting off steam, it's exercise, it's settling grudges, it's trying to get advancement and be promoted within your unit. It is all of these things. You can fight alone. You can fight with a chain brother. You can fight on different levels. We get to see all of the different levels that they can fight on. You can fight to first blood or second blood, or is there third blood? And then there's the Sanguis Extremis, which is to the death essentially, or to close to death. We get to see it over and over and over again in the Legion. It is a core component of what they're doing when they're not fighting combats. And it's different than our practice cages because they're not doing it for practice necessarily. They're doing it for fun. And they have an arena and people get together and they watch and they wager on the fights. And there are favorites and there are the people that perform and do well. I think about a blood spitter, who again the name is not going to come, but we'll talk about him in a minute. Cargos, I think is his name, Cargos Bloodspitter. We get to see him, and he's a fan favorite, and everybody likes him, and that defines his character, right? We get to see who he is. But furthermore, in addition to sort of the impact of that culture on the World Eaters, we get to see a whole host of other characters also engaging in the practice cages. For example, we know that Argol Tall likes to fight in the practice cages, and that he's not particularly good at it because he really never takes it very seriously. On the other hand, we know that Sigismund of the Imperial Fists also fights in the practice cages a lot and is very good at what he does. In fact, the Black Templars and their tradition of wrapping their weapons with chains comes from the practice or the fighting pits of the World Eaters. And so here we have the World Eaters culture literally bleeding over into other legions. We know that the chaplaincy and the what are they called, the different warrior lodges didn't even take root in the World Eaters, and didn't have to, because they already had sort of their own subculture that was present before the heresy even happened with regard to this. We get to see Nasir Amet in the practice cages. That is a big part of his story, is in not practice cages, in the pit fighting, in the arena fighting, in there, because he is the blood brother to Cargos Bloodspitter. So they're paired up. We get to see Karn in the practice cage, or the fighting pits, and we also know that Karn is like Argol Tall, not particularly serious about them. He's never very good at fighting in them because he's just not, doesn't take it seriously. So we get to see all of these different perspectives. Oh, Erebus, we get to see Erebus in the fighting pits. We get to see, there's another word bearer's chaplain it's in Echoes of Eternity, that we get to see in the fighting pits. So they reference the fact that they're very good in the fighting pits. We get to see this over and over and over again, sort of bleeding out, building cultural connections in between different legions, the ideas that are happening in the fighting pits showing up in other legions. It is a core component of what they are. And again, if you wanted to write a story about a World Eater, it's pretty easy to write a story about what they're doing in their downtime. You're either at the fighting pits watching people fight, or you're in the fighting pits doing things in and of yourself. And they literally are devoting portions of their ship to it. Again, in, I think, Echoes of Eternity, they talk about using portions of the flagship, the World Eaters flagship, for the fighting pits, and kind of converting them over. And the fact that the World Eaters keep basically stealing new locations to build new fighting pits with different features to them. it is a pretty cool thing. And when you start to kind of dig into it, like it's all over the place, and you wouldn't expect it because the world eaters are sort of just like these maddened, crazed guys that are, they've got the butcher's nails in them and they're just nuts. However, when you dig into their lore, the fighting pits end up being the one point when they can be themselves and they can relax and they can engage in recreation and have some joy in their life. And so you can see why it's such an important part. But yeah, I like it. It's pretty cool. So with that said, where would you have ranked places, people? What legions do you think I missed? Are there any pieces of lore that you think I left out? What's your favorite Legiones Astartes culture? Like who, when you think about what they're doing in their downtime, who pops in your mind as being sort of the most prevalent? Thanks very much for hanging out. I appreciate you hanging out to the end, and I'll see you in the next video.